First, I'd like to thank all of our sponsors, American Association of University Women of Walla Walla, Commitment to Community, La Voz, the Walla Walla Latino Alliance, the Walla Walla Realtors Association, the Walla Walla Union Bulletin, Walla Walla Valley Chamber of Commerce, and Whitman College's Political Science Department. There's a tremendous number of people involved in organizing this, and it's wonderful to have all these groups as our sponsors. Imagine that you have been elected and we are now 2 years in the future. It's October of 2021. What will have been your major accomplishments on the City Council? Accomplishments could be anything from a resolution you've introduced and that the council has passed, to moving the council in a certain direction through your influence. And since it's easy to state a goal, but not as easy to work through the process that can get in the way of achieving those goals or can facilitate achieving those goals, tell us how you will have persuaded your fellow council members to support these aspirations.
So, life happens pretty quick. This election will not be won on the evening of November 5th. But moreover, it will be the course of the next few years, a successful candidate has accomplished reasonable goals and utilizing community partnerships and having the skills to make them happen. A collaborative council that listens with the intent to hear and understand and that speaks with clarity. I would look at items through the East Ward lens while realizing taking a citywide approach may provide my co-council members with much needed programs in their wards. I would be but one part of a group working on solutions with city staff focused on delivering the best possible services. Collaboration is square one for the future. By supporting the city's legislative agenda in US 12, Phase 7, and completion, then advocating for Phase 8, continuing the work on securing state transportation funds for US 12 at Clinton and Wilbur, and the prioritization of the Mill Creek watershed and to protect our natural resources. As a group, we will need to work on finding the right solution for the ambulance fund deficiency that serves both our neighbors and first responders. Is it a levy or possibly forming a fire district? Finding the right fit for our needs will be critical for long-term success and require working together with our service providers. Continuing the ongoing infrastructure and repair of roads and sidewalks and sewer lines is in a thoughtful, proactive way while looking for grant funds sources to help offset costs. I want to see safer sidewalks and streets in our city. I will continue to advocate for the expansion of neighborhood outreach programs citywide, including the East Ward. My history in working in other neighborhoods has shown me the value of neighbors coming together to problem solve and address concerns. New housing construction in Washington was up last year, 17%. But the population in Washington increased at 24%. That's a fairly obvious indicator of the need for housing. What, where, and who does it serve? We need a wide range of housing options across income levels. Specifically, one item would be to increase the city's home repair program capacity by expanding to all wards and would keep some of our most vulnerable neighbors in their homes. Promoting implementation of development incentives and infrastructure credits to promote growth where and how we want it to occur. Asking the Sustainability Committee to map the city's energy footprint using existing data to determine practical ways to save money and find common sense options to reduce the city consumption and lower cost to citizens. We as a council and as a city will be working on clear and consistent communication and be open to new avenues of outreach. How we say things is as important as what we say. And in a collaborative democracy, the sharp line between those who decide and those who are affected disappears.
All right, well, first and foremost, I think that this question is fun in theory, but in reality, my job as a potential council member is to evaluate the ideas from the 33,000 people in Walla Walla and take a full circle approach to the positives and potential negatives of what we would like to see happen. So with that being said, we're going to step into a time machine, and it is now October 2021. The vacant and available properties in Walla Walla have been or are on track to be renovated through my vacant building redevelopment plan that I first spoke of back in 2019. Our downtown offers more food and entertainment than ever before. The Eastgate businesses have seen new development, job creation, and an uptick in tourist activity. The Eastgate Merchants Coalition, which is a coalition that I formed in the summer of 2019, has seen new membership to include home-based businesses and is succeeding at a rate I had not yet imagined. Excuse me. The city of Walla Walla now has more streetlights than ever, and our program to expand on all 4 wards as the safety of our citizens is at an utmost priority, as most of certain neighborhoods in Walla Walla are totally black when you do not have your porch light on. And as it is now approaching the winter season, we are ready to open the doors to the Chief Yelepit Community Center, which is under the guidance of the Walla Walla Parks and Recreation. In an effort to keep costs down and youth development, the high school students and college students will participate in community service, meet community service requirements for their respective schools. High school students and the college students will act in a capacity as referees and coaches, and the college students will act in a capacity as junior administrators under the direction of the Parks and Recreation Department. To be totally honest, this system is not going to be fancy, and we don't anticipate it being state-of-the-art. The whole point of this facility is for steady recreation, games and activities, and team sports. Continued involvement with the community has allowed for a better relationship between the citizens and the city, and that's what I've been able to do as a member of the City Council. Excuse me. Thank you for your time.
Good evening to my politically engaged neighbors. What would I accomplish by October 2021 if I was elected? I have a few ideas that I will list here. I would push for having a, quote, bus travel advantage, unquote, in Walla Walla. Lower income people especially need an economical transit system. Fares should be reduced so that it makes economic sense for anybody to ride the bus rather than drive their private vehicle. For longer travel, such as to the Amtrak and Greyhound station in Pasco, cushy buses would be the norm. Can you imagine the ridership increase if we used deluxe buses, such as those used by many charter companies? Also, we must have an indoor waiting area to keep customers out of the harsh elements. Valley Transit employs security personnel anyway, so security should not be an issue. Another idea, I would encourage, it's not an idea, I would push this. I would encourage industries which employ adults full-time and that work in conjunction with our surrounding agricultural enterprises, especially organic crops. I would also encourage paid jobs for students and retired people because we can all use the money. I would push for youth activities such as boys and girls clubs in the parks that don't have the advantage of a school nearby. I would encourage building family homes on their own lots as well as sufficient multifamily housing to meet demand while keeping sufficient green space. I would push for repair of crumbling sidewalks, streets, and bridges. I would work with the county to establish a centralized day service area for the unhoused. How would I convince the rest of the council. It depends on who you elect to the council. Decisions depend on a majority vote, and one must try to be convincing to other members of the council by reasoning and keeping in mind that a good idea may have problems that can develop, which are not anticipated. You, the voters, are the boss. You are the ones who help decide Walla Walla's future. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to tell a story. So let's pretend that it's October 2021. It has been a very active 2 years. When I joined the council, the impact of homelessness and affordable housing was seen in big cities and also in our area, even with the record economic growth and jobs. According to the Secretary of State's extensive studies and the market study for our local housing authority, the root cause was found to be restrictive zoning and overregulation, which decreased the rental availability and overwhelmed the existing services dealing with mental health and substance abuse. The driving factor as the economy went up was that the growth of home building lagged behind, directly affecting rental availability. Then homelessness steadily increased with the 1.7% rental vacancy rate. Keep in mind that a 3% vacancy rate is an acute shortage. This data also showed that Walla Walla lagged behind in building permits over the past 18 years. We have not kept up with the historic 2% growth over many years. Large out-of-town developers wanted to build huge developments in the wheat fields surrounding our city. So 2 years ago, a committee was formed, joining mutual and opposing sources. I shared the story about the Walla Walla Way with the committee. Over 12 years ago, water rights issues put farmers and tribal commercial fisheries at odds, and a person couldn't even put a well in for a house here in the valley. So those opposing forces sat down, leaving politics and animosity out the door. They came out with a plan that met the needs of water conservation in our rivers, but allowed farmers to irrigate their fields, and builders were once again able to build the homes that we so desperately needed. The call went out to the builders and local developers and city planners, and so much was at stake. So politics and unpopular cliches were set aside, and the question was put out: how do we increase the housing supply in our city and our valley? Do we increase taxes and regulations, or do we back off with the administration of social regulations and requirements to allow the expanding market to make the housing more affordable? Today, with the work of the committee, the rate of home building has doubled within our city limits. Codes were re-examined for true safety, and rental availability rose with a direct decrease in homelessness. The cost of housing stabilized as local builders and developers increased the density within the city, making services more efficient without the need for additional taxes. That process was the Walla Walla Way, and I believe in that.
So I am completing my first 4-year term on the city council, and I want to suggest that change happens incrementally. And while we've talked about dreams, and I have dreams, I think we all do, I also understand the reality of what can be accomplished in 2 years, 4 years, or whatever. There are several issues that continue to take my energy and support. Some have been talked about. We need to come to a conclusion around the fire ambulance system. As you may understand, it's been not self-supporting for several years. There's also been consideration of a regionalization. And,
A little closer.
okay. We're looking at a regionalization concept. We want to continue to repair our streets, our sewer system, our water supply system. We have gone from the worst leakage of any city in the state as far as water to we've saved about 40% of what we've been leaking. So we want to continue to work on that. recycling is an issue that has come upon us. It's a national, it's an international issue, but I'd like to see that we maintain some kind of recycling system until the markets stabilize. Economic development. One of the things that we do a study every year, scientific evaluation and input from citizenry, and retail options is one that we want to continue to work on. Affordable housing has been mentioned, and certainly that's an issue that we want to continue to look at policies that would incentivize both private for-profit and not-for-profit developers in providing housing. One thing that I would like to propose to the council that we've tried, and I think it can be successful, is to establish an ad hoc committee for issues that don't often arise, but that have considerable interest throughout the community. We did that with our ward system after we established that. We established an ad hoc system. We spent 6 months working with interested parties. We did it when we worked with the Downtown Association merchants around the homelessness issue downtown, and that was successful. I'd like to bring that back, and so it was in all of our thoughts on the council as we proceed. Thank you.
Good evening. If I was elected, I would like to be known as the councilman that was willing to make waves and ask questions no one wants to ask. I'll be known as the councilman who helped develop a budget that didn't allow for financial waste. I'll be known as a councilman who helped efficient communication and education between the public and the city. I will be known for my sincerity, honesty, and my forward thinking, and continuing with a tradition of the Saturno family that has lasted for now 5 generations. And what were the things that brought me to that position? I'm an independent thinker. I take info from my own research and not just what's presented to me within the council chambers. I have a young and vibrant vision, and I always evaluate things on a full scale of cause and effects. I think we all know what the issues are that we have at hand with our city, and it's going to be a group effort with everyone within the city to help resolve these issues, and that's exactly how it would have to be addressed within the city council as well, is just an honest and open, continued conversation to reach an overall consensus for the betterment of the city as a whole.
How can the annexation process be made more transparent? And if the Hayden Homes Cottonwood development falls through, for example, based on environmental or geological findings, would you support that the parcel be removed from the UGA?
I think the issue of transparency is a very easy to mitigate. All it takes is exactly that, transparency. We have to ask ourselves if this sale was to go forward, which my current knowledge, it looks like it is not, but it's not final. You have to ask yourself, why did we get here? And then realize that this is a perfect example of a situation that could have been mitigated and resolved in a far better way. We need to listen to people that live here in the city. We also need to listen to the needs of the city as a whole. We need to figure out what we want as a community and what we're willing to accept by the builders and developers within the city. It's important to always listen to the public and what they say, but also the things that cannot be said and the things that are not necessarily recognized with needs that are affecting the country as a whole. Always having an open and honest dialogue and going through the process in a manner that allows for there to be no questions that have to be asked because it already is out in the public knowledge is probably one of the best ways that you can help relieve the questions and the animosity within the city as a whole by its residents that are maybe unaware of the process and lack of access to the information necessary to make the assessments or inform themselves of the situation as a whole.
I appreciate the question. Transparency and understanding is obviously very important. And I also understand from the process that we're involved in right now that transparency maybe hasn't been our best suit. At the same time, there are legal requirements that the state of Washington puts on an annexation process. It started with the Urban Growth Management Act that was established the early 1990s. And so there are specific regulations that a city must adhere to. We're involved in that process. It requires both public comment and then analysis before it even comes to the council. This is a particularly unique situation in the fact that it is a very, very large proposed annexation and development. Most likely the largest we've seen maybe in the history of the city. So it needs to be taken very seriously. And it's right in the middle of that process. I don't want to say too much because if and when it does come to council, it's a quasi-judicial situation now, and as a council person, I would be expected to act as a jurist in making a determination. With regard to the other question, should it not happen, and then would I be open to removal from the UGA? Yes, I would. In fact, there has been some property this year that the city requested from the county, and it's a process we have to go through the county, on the south side of the city that was requested from and removed, and so I would be open to that. Thank you.
You stated that transparency was an issue with the current way that this has been presented to the community. How would you approach that with future annexation or developments and the accountability of the builders in said developments in the building process and quality and drainage issues and environmental impact?
What I want to say is communication is the key, and having everyone understand what the legal requirements are, what the dates for input from the community are, how those comments will be taken and considered. With regard to the specifics, those are all analyzed by and required by the state of Washington. I haven't seen how those reports would impact or would play out with regard to this particular proposal, so I'm not prepared to discuss them. Obviously, traffic, how do you get water to the project, roads, who's going to develop it, who's going to pay for it, what the hydrologist has to say, all those kinds of things need to be discussed and considered in a very serious fashion. Thank you.
What is your plan to address the need for affordable housing in Walla Walla? What do you consider the city's role, and where in Walla Walla would be a good location for high-density affordable housing, also considering neighborhood character?
Thank you, Richard. So the first part of the question about what would my housing plan been? I was like, did somebody send this question to me? I appreciate the question a lot, and the fact that a priority for my housing plan is to expand the city's role in home repair, and that is low-income houses in a certain ward or I should say a district or a couple of census tracts in Walla Walla, are currently being repaired under a home repair program that is a low or no interest loan to those residents, and is fixing furnaces and roofs and things that people are just getting by and can't afford to do. So that's affordable housing right there, keeping people in their homes. If you don't have to build housing for those people and just keep them in their homes and keep those houses serving people, the next part of my housing plan would be to, and I've been already involved with the Community Council study on housing, as well as a task force on creating a community land trust for housing. I think that's a really good option in taking, basically a Reader's Digest version of it is taking the land out of the price of the house, and keeping it affordable in perpetuity so that it doesn't rise at the cost of other housing, and you come to a formula that the house is then appreciated on. That would be, and looking at that, possibly getting some land donated from the city that is not being used. The second part of the question, what is the city's role? Thank you. Is that I think the city is an important role in this and being involved, and not only looking at avenues of where and incentivizing where housing can be. I learned that Wenatchee wanted development in certain areas of their city, so they put infrastructure in and they made development incentives so that there weren't connection fees for people that wanted to build in that area. That's where we drive where we want the houses to be and the development, if we are proactive in that.
Well, first off, according to the Walla Walla 2018 Comprehensive Plan, the direction that the city would like to take Walla Walla is north. So, first and foremost, I would be more interested in seeing a housing development head that direction. With consideration to the housing that we already have, it's absolutely paramount, and my work with the Community Development Block Grants Committee allows us the opportunity to put to put roofs on homes that can't necessarily afford it on their own, as well as putting streetlights in neighborhoods that need them. And the city's role for the development of these neighborhoods is really partnership and inviting neighbors to come and take part, because I've been to a lot of city council meetings, and a lot of the times there's not a whole lot of participation. And one I could think of, there was 21 people in the room, and 14 of them received paychecks from the city. So most of the participation that we get from the community is when annexation is on the line. So we really need the citizens of the city to come and take part and express their feelings and let us know where they would like to see some development. We need to have an open mind in the development of our city for now and for our children, really. So thank you.
So James, as far as you expanding north in the city, would you be also open to looking at proposals in other areas that met? I know on my role in the Planning Commission that I sat on one development expansion that was up in the Eastgate area, up on East Ward, our ward, where a developer wanted to put in the Providence addition up above the Assumption School, and it came to the Planning Commission, and it didn't fly the first time because the density was too much, and there weren't sidewalks, and the intersection wasn't right, but they came back. So would you be willing at looking at options for other than the north? You're going to focus on the north?
Absolutely, I am open-minded to what's in the best interest of the city. With the Growth Management Act that the city of Walla Walla joined into voluntarily in 1991, I believe it was, it's really beneficial for the city to grow within the ideas of the citizens, but also with an eye towards the development and the ideas that our state government has in mind for us, because through our involvement with the Growth Management Act and following the guidelines, we are then able to receive state funding, which lowers the cost on the people of Walla Walla, which is what we would really like to do. And so as long as the growth is not infringing upon our agricultural development, and it's something that the people would really like to see happen. I'm with it, I understand.
Yes, the affordable housing question. I think that the best place to put high-density housing is centralized. I don't think it's a good idea to put it out in the periphery. It's too hard to get into town if you don't have a car. We like to set it up so that cars are optional for to lower greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm one that's just, I have a partiality towards the old-fashioned house on the lot with the picket fence, and there isn't much of those in Walla Walla. I think we should make sure we develop some of those too. And I did see on the website where you were talking about the possibly annexing the north. I'm not really too keen on annexing because I don't think we're taking care of the heart of our city that well. And I'm just not excited about growing when we neglect the inside of our city. And what Ted was saying about the home repair, I mean, home repair program is awesome. I think I'm glad you brought that up. And I always wonder, why is it we have this land on the west side that just kind of sits there and it doesn't get developed? And I've come up with the answer. It is because we have a lot of goat head stickers and they get stuck in your tennis shoes. And they're really aggravating. When you walk inside and a goat head gets out, okay, you know what happens. If you step on a goat head, it is miserable.
There are lots throughout our city that could be used. The zoning on those lots, some of them are multi-use zoning, and we would have to look at the city would have to loosen up that zoning practice. But one thing that I think, increasing the housing works with the increase of supply. It'll lower the prices. But one thing we need to resist is the idea that we need purpose-built low-income housing. To force new built low-income is basically making disastrous housing projects. And we need to make sure that there's a lot of different affordability factors and houses within an area, so it's not just low income. Also, as housing goes up, the older houses, like that were built in the 50s, those would become very reasonable price-wise and probably become rentals. This is good for the safety of our seniors and our families to have the different sorts of housing and not just one type of housing in the neighborhood. So,
Susan, do you like the idea of having a development kind of like what we were going to have out by in the Cottonwood area, in the area that is on the west side by Myra Road?
that's a huge development, and like Mr. Moss said, it was the biggest in our history. I think that sort of development would be good in certain places and not good in other places, because we need housing, and so I would have to look at the circumstances where and all that and what type of housing and stuff, but I think that the housing development would be good. So Oh, and my question to Sharon is, you talk a lot about aesthetics in neighborhoods with housing. What would be your plan to create more aesthetics in the neighborhoods?
It seems like the planning commission makes a lot of careful decisions about, having a certain amount of trees. And, I would have to look closely at all the planned developments. I think we should have a development with a park-like setting, and my dream type of a development is like a mirror image of the Garrison Creek development, which isn't really affordable housing, but I think we gotta have some more of that in Walla Walla.
Well, obviously, the city has a major role in housing development, starting with the Planning Commission. We also employ a hearings examiner when need be to adjudicate applications. Zoning is a paramount issue. With this last update of our comprehensive plan, we did change some of the zoning requirements, so I believe it's easier for some of the infill lots to be developed as was discussed, and I'm very supportive of that. I think we need to look at potential incentives from a developer standpoint, possibly tax breaks for a certain period of time as allowed by law in particular areas. There's one development right now that's under construction in the downtown corridor. And while I didn't support the length of that subsidy, I did support the development of it. We need to understand where we've got infrastructure. It's been discussed before. You have to have water, streets, and roads, or sidewalks, and what's the cost of those, who's going to pay for it. The minor home repair program, I've been a supporter of that for years. One of Walla Walla's uniquenesses to me is the fact that we don't have a concentration of any one particular type of housing for blocks and blocks and blocks, and I appreciate that, and I want to see that continue. The community land trust, I think, is an issue that needs to be explored.
I have, since starting this process of running for council, have preferred to use the term as not affordable housing, but sustainable housing, because if we cannot sustain what we already have, then nothing is affordable. I believe that we are also missing what I call middle housing, which is in between low-income housing and super high-density multi-complex. So places like townhouses, condos, and a live-work type situation where you have kind of like what is going in actually where the former Alex Lodge was, where you have businesses below and residential places up above. I think that if we gave incentives for builders to build here, be it by tax breaks and also looking at our permitting process and simplifying that and streamlining it, would be some huge incentives to get new buildership in town. High density is probably the most beneficial for not needing to annex land in the UGA in. I think that we should focus on the land that we have within the city at current, like use the infill, and look at buildings like Clinton Court and the Washington Apartments that have little footprint but a huge amount of residents living within them. And if we could encourage building like that fills existing spaces, that is already utilizing city utilities and services without the need of adding to those and at a cost at the city and its residents, then I think that that is the most best use of our time and the city's resources and finances.
Well, thank you. Julian, you talked about several issues that I think are worth merit. The permitting process, could you elaborate a little bit more as how, where you see roadblocks there and how that might bring costs down?
I know from experience that it is, well, it's obviously expensive. Permits are not cheap, but that's to be, you know, that's to be expected. However, anytime that you are waiting on an inspector to come and inspect a piece of property, you're wasting time that you could be working on something else or finishing the project and getting it onto the market. So by streamlining that process, getting, you know, very competent inspectors that are efficient and use the best of their knowledge and time would significantly reduce, you know, the whole entire process and be more enticing for builders to want to work with a municipality that has a strong permitting department.
I'm concerned with the type of builders coming into the valley. Would you support local builders over large corporate ones? Would you support developing properties within the city limits as opposed to incorporating new property areas? And should the city accept money from a potential developer?
So, first part of the question was local versus large. I think both are important, and to have diversity of builders. I have to insert a little bit. We've been working with the community college for the last 3 years. This will be our 4th year of building homes for first-time home buyers with the community college class in order to create a workforce here in town that is kind of missing. We're missing some people that go out and work in the mud and cold. And so we started our 4th house here just 2 weeks ago, and I think that to date there's been about 22 students graduate. We have actually had a problem with contractors coming and taking students before they're done with the class. So first part of the question is local versus large. I think we need diversity, and I think they need to be quality whether they're local or large. It's not necessarily a size, in my opinion. Infill versus sprawl, I think we should focus and incentivize infill and look at, and I don't like sprawl. The Tri-Cities seems to sprawl, in my opinion, and I like Walla Walla for what it is and some of the diverse neighborhoods, and I would really like to focus on that, and that new neighborhoods are thoughtful and insightful and end up being like the rest of the neighborhoods in Walla Walla, where they're pleasant to walk down and there's large trees. Should the city take money for a developer? I said yes, in the form of a fee or a permit application in order to build and develop in areas for us. But I also think we should look at incentivizing, giving them breaks, developers, and incentives on connection fees in order to get them to build things and do stuff where we want them to do it.
All right, to the first question about the big companies versus the little companies. I believe that there should be the ability to level the playing field so that the mom and pop contractors can compete and maintain, because those are our neighbors as well. As far as the large companies coming to Walla Walla to do large developments, I am a bit concerned about that, because in the end, the people that are left to deal with the situation are the homeowners themselves. And so it is of the highest priority that we make sure we get it right the first time. I absolutely support building within before we sprawl out. It makes the most amount of sense, and it means that we're not taking away from the agricultural land, the streams and the rivers that we've have given Walla Walla its name. I believe that accepting money from a large corporation ahead of a project may be a conflict of interest, so it's definitely important to make sure that we are not indebted or responsible with doing something that the people of Walla Walla might not want to be committed to. Now, as far as, this potential development that so many people are here to learn about, I'm concerned because it is the potential of 1,600 people in an area that it's about 106 acres. We're not too familiar with the breakdown of the houses from condos to multi-bedroom, 4-bedroom or larger. The expanse would have serious concerns in response for the emergency responders, and it's just something we should know more about from the proposed developer. Thank you. How do you feel about the rest of the city and the development, as most of the attention for the city is directed towards the downtown area? How can we bring more benefit to the West Ward and to the East Ward and to the South as well?
Thanks, Jane. So, moving development and construction and those type of things, Wenatchee did a really good job of they had some areas in their town that were underdeveloped and underutilized, and they really wanted to see growth in that area. So what they did is for a certain period of time, they waived the connection fees for development in that area, and they made some short-term tax-based incentives for development to go that way. And I really think that, and to touch on Julian's point of the planning department, I really think that there's a huge amount that is lost in communication. It almost seems like there could be a wayfinder or somebody that could help people through the system. So the larger agencies or corporations know how to work through the system, but the smaller developers or people that just want to do something on 1 or 2 lots or their own lot really struggle with the process. There almost needs to be a navigator, somebody assigned to a smaller place that helps people through the planning process. Being on the planning commission, it took me a year or 2 just to learn the process, and I went through. So people that are doing small developments, maybe in the West Ward and areas, really struggle with the knowledge it takes to get up to speed, and then they may be done with their development. So the larger developments have an advantage.
I am for having local transactions as much as possible. I don't like the people coming in from the outside and large corporations getting into development. And I like the idea of people buying lots and building their own houses, and but I know we do the development thing. But I wanted to say that this is kind of probably a strange thing to say, but I believe that there's about a 50% chance of having a recession, according to the economists, next year. I think we're through with our growth spurt, and if Backdoor doesn't get annexed, I just don't really see Walla Walla growing out. And what Julian said about sustainability, I think that's most important. I am just not a big economic growth person, and there's something about Walla Walla where we seem to attract more of the retired people than the families with kids. So, and I've heard that the Pasco area, they expect a lot of growth. And they have, like the Columbia River, they have a lot of manufacturing going, but we kind of have our limitations here. And I just don't fear a lot of growth could happen. Thank you.
Okay, so the types of builders, I believe that we should stay local, but we need to look at the builders. Right now also there are so many fees and studies and everything that has to be done on a property before the building takes place, and so we need to look at that type of thing, and I feel incentivizing would be a good idea. Also, sometimes the out-of-town builders may hire people from Walla Walla too, so diversity is good, but mostly I like to stay local. Keeping things within our city, we have lots within our city, and the city planners don't like to have what they call islands in their, they call it islands when the boundary is not, it's like off. So I think fill those up first, but I also feel like there are times where annexation needs to happen. So, and then as for money being accepted, like Ted said, you know, there's a lot of fees and stuff that should be paid, but if a big developer comes in and the property needs sidewalks, it's going to affect our schools, there needs to be some sort of an impact fee for that so that the people that live there don't have to pay those fees later. So.
Yeah, I didn't say anything about accepting money. It doesn't seem right, but I'm sure there's transactions and deals that go on, such as what you read about in College Place with the Hayden homes and developing a park, and there was a kind of a deal with the city. But we have to look at the ethics and what is acceptable and what is legal. I wanted to ask Susan what she thought of why is it that so many of the lots in the West Ward just remain empty, and do you have any suggestions on how to utilize those lots?
Are you talking about the empty buildings?
The lots.
The lots
Yeah.
that are empty? Well, there are builders that want to build on those lots, but the multi-use zoning is preventing them from doing what they want to do. So, of course, what I say is we need to look at that. The zoning regulations are what's holding back a lot of builders. And looking historically, we are behind in our building, so we need to look at that.
The city council's role is setting policy. And I'm a free market type person. I don't believe we can say, hey, developer, you can't come into town because you're too big. We need to set standards and adhere to them. Make sure that that building inspector is trained and is efficient in making sure that the buildings are being properly built. I also understand the smaller builders, and they need support too. And so it's a good idea that this Pathfinder, that might be an area where this ad hoc committee that I spoke of could be formed, so we could understand where some of the touch points are and the frustrations from some of the smaller builders. Infill lots, again, how can they be incentivized? Maybe we could work with a builder and help them with financing. Not that the city would finance it, but there are programs, both federal, state, financing programs that can assist a developer, both private for-profit and not-for-profit developers. Should we accept money from a builder? That sounds like a loaded question. Most likely we should be requiring them to pay us for not only the building permit and the work that's going to be required on the city's part, but again, if it's a large development, they need to be stepping up to pay for those needed streets and roads and other resources. Thank you.
I believe that any city is only as strong as its economy and its workforce. So by keeping spending and builders local as much as possible, that only helps to add to the local economy. That's not to say that I don't believe that anyone, as long as the process is followed to the legal ramifications of that and it's done in an appropriate manner, that no one shouldn't be able to build, if that is the general consensus of the city. But there's a difference between a big developer coming in and using all of their own materials and their workforce, and then building, you know, however many homes, it doesn't matter. And then at the end of the day, once it's all said and done, they leave and they go on to their next project. But if we could encourage big builders that are coming into our area to, as much as possible, use local craftsmen, that would also help the local economy, and is what we should always encourage, because that helps all of us when we're all involved in the local economy. I don't think that we should be taking money from anyone. That seems like a total conflict of interest. I've heard talk of that happening this recent go around with some of the city officials. You know, it's a small town, people talk, and that's exactly that, but it's not a good look for anyone involved in the process if something like that is going mouth to mouth.
To make a statement that you're suggesting that there's graft within the city for a development, is that what I heard you say?
Not for development, just from a developer. Sorry, from a developer. Just from a developer, not as an individual before they were running for office. But like I said, it was just what I was told from a couple different individuals, and then leaving it exactly as that. However, that's how I took the question, and I just think that we should always try to maintain a certain level of transparency and not allow for something like this to even be going around, whether it's true or not.
I won't disregard or object to or disagree with the fact that we should not allow it. What I do have concerns about is how things get spread on the internet, and I have no, if that were happening within our city, I would be the first to investigate, but I have no reason to believe that that's happening.
That's good to hear.
What are the city's plans to support early childhood education?
From what I have been told, the enrollment is down within the city, and we potentially have a surplus of school floor space. And if we can utilize floor space, that any wasted or underutilized building is not benefiting anyone. It's just a liability, it's maintenance. So by providing the opportunity, which is going to take a lot of planning and development and funding, quite frankly, but to offer that would be a huge incentive for new families that have young children to move into town, and at the rate that we're heading, we are getting more towards a retirement age demographic, and that is not a huge indicator of a thriving economy, but that's a little complex because we have the agriculture and the wine industry here, as well as tourism, that kind of evens that out. But I think any time that we can provide any form of education, whether it be coming from the city on how to recycle or educating kids at a younger age, it just benefits us all in the longer run, be it from truancy or just having more informed children and educated children that are going to potentially be the foundation of our community.
Well, I'm excited to share with you that the National League of Cities has chosen Walla Walla as one of 8 cities around the nation to work with, to share best practices as how cities can work with their population. Childhood education is an extremely important issue. Birth to 3 is obviously setting in young people's minds. It gets them educated. The more you can educate and give them positive reinforcement, the better. Childcare is an extremely expensive thing. So how can cities be involved? Well, we're going to find out over the next year or two. First of all, I think we can work with our schools. We can work with other entities, the Children's Home Society, other organizations that work with young people. I can think of Parks and Recreation. How can they play a part? How can the library play a role? How can the police department through community policing play a role? So I think there are lots of ways that we maybe haven't thought of that I'm excited that we're going to be included in this group of 8 across the country. We'll learn from those other 7. Maybe they'll learn a little bit from us. And we'll make Walla Walla an even better place to be for those 3-year-olds when they're adults and supporting many of us. Thank you.
Okay, so kids are starting kindergarten without the skills that they need to be in a classroom, and because we have a lack of childcare in town, there are waiting lists upon waiting lists to get into any preschool or childcare, and it's rough on parents. So I think that's great that we're getting the preschool. Also, the Early Childhood Coalition is doing a lot of great work. Another thing to think about is parents nowadays. We have to have a 2-parent working family to afford things. And so when kids are growing up, they're not getting the vocabulary or the skills that they need necessary to start kindergarten. So they're starting a little bit behind. And with this new childcare and the preschool, we will get that up to speed and more success in school. So
The early childhood education so far has gotten to the point where, and this is something I always try to, as far as the city being involved with the early childhood education decision that was made recently, they had the power of input and convincing the school board, but the school board are the authorities. And I personally did not like the idea of what they were planning to do with Blue Ridge. And what it was before was K through 5, and there was some low income, as far as I understand, low income childcare there. And because of a new program in Olympia, they were given funds to start their early learning center. The main problem I had with it was the busing of the kids to the other side of town, the K through 5 kids. And I just thought it was unfair. It's kind of like they said they were trying to mix in the low income with the rest of the Walla Walla. But one of the main reasons they did it was to increase efficiency so that the staff wouldn't have to drive around so much. But what I wanted was them to have early childhood centers in the neighborhood schools, so the kids wouldn't have to be bussed around and the families wouldn't be broken up.
Thank you.
I think it's in the best interest of the citizens of Walla Walla to have the best available education for their children, and we can sort out the cost of it later. With that in mind, my daughter attended Blue Ridge Elementary School for 2 years of preschool, and that has done so much for her education and where she's at right now with it. At the time in 2013, I believe that only Green Park Elementary School and Blue Ridge had the preschool program that we have, so why can't we expand it through all our elementary schools? With that in mind, I was able to participate through the Watchdogs program, which is Dads of Great Students, and it allowed me the opportunity to interact with students that might not see a positive male role model at the end of the day. So also, the other thing that we could improve on is the fact that the schools should offer a better open enrollment process and the transportation that goes with that. The people of Walla Walla should be able to decide where their kids go to school, and as taxpayers, you shouldn't be told you cannot put your children on that bus. I think we do have some really good things going on, and our Walla Walla public school system has a great program called Skyward, and it allows that the parents can know exactly what their children are up to, whether they are missing an assignment or if they've been late to class. And I use that tool on a daily basis, and I'm glad it wasn't around when I was a student. Thank you for your time.
I think the city could play an important role by lobbying for regulatory relief on some of what it takes to run and own a daycare. There are also the city plans for early childhood, making it more available for people to start up that business. The shortage of daycares and early Head Starts and education being a critical component to our youth. And then you utilize the neighborhood outreach programs that exist in Walla Walla to reach out to families that are struggling with children and getting them to and from school. And then along with that, I think the logistics along with daycare and the expense of daycare is huge for families, and the city looking at some way to help with that, and as a strong partner with the Walla Walla Public School System and Children's Home Society. I know the city right now has partnered in the past, for example, with the Safe Pathways program, like a flashing intersection across Chestnut Street for Garrison School students. Those type of things where the city isn't running a daycare, but they're doing everything they possibly can, maybe with an ad hoc group or a task force, looking at making it more the school district and people that want to be in the daycare or provide early learning for our children, make it easier for them to do that job.